So I think when we talk about attracting global talent, I think there are two key questions, right? The first question is why is this important now more than ever? And then two is how do we attract global talent?
If your goal is to be an entrepreneur, it's not to be at a place where everyone is at, it's to be at a place where the future relies on. If we look at Jensen Huang, he's Taiwanese, but he built NVIDIA for US and now becomes a US weapon. Elon Musk is an immigrant. So you got tons of immigrants, talented immigrants, located to the US and built businesses for the US.
Right.
And that's incredible.
I really admire how Singaporeans, they are as much a part of this global talent community as much as the foreign professionals working there. Like I've seen them working in the global setting, I've worked with them, and I perceive that not once do they feel themselves to be like inferior.
Jotted down kind of 5 key things that I think the government can do to attract global talent more effectively. 5S, right? Statutory barriers, skills, services, safety, and social integration.
Wow, you're talented at this.
เปลี่ยนความกลัวเป็นความหวังเตรียมความพร้อมในช่วงเวลาชี้เป็นชี้ตายกับ The Standard Economic Forum 2024 Brave New World เศรษฐกิจไทยไล่กวดโลกใหม่สกัดทุกความรู้ปี 2025 ให้คุณก้าวทันเทรนด์โลกในเวลาเพียงแค่ 3 วันเจาะลึกเมกะเทรนด์ใหญ่เมื่อ AI ฉลาดกว่ามนุษย์ทุนจีนครองโลกสงครามยืดเยื้ออุตสาหกรรมถูก disrupt สิ่งแวดล้อมทำลายเศรษฐกิจพร้อมล้วงอินไซต์เศรษฐกิจการเมืองการศึกษาไทยจะปรับตัวอย่างไรไม่ให้ถูกทิ้งไว้ข้างหลังนี่คือฟอรัมที่คุณจะได้ร่วมฟังผู้ออกแบบนโยบายตัวจริงวางแผนอะไรคิดอะไรและได้คลุกวงในผู้นำระดับโลกและไทยมากกว่า 40 ชีวิตสุรเกียรติเสถียรไทยปานปรีพหิทธานุกรวีระไทยสันติประภพสุรชาติบำรุงสุขวิลเลียมอีไฮเน็กบรรยงพงพาณิชย์สมเกียรติตั้งกิจวานิชสุภลักษณ์อัมพุทธสันติธานเสถียรไทยการดีเลียวไพโรธจี๊บคลายและสปีกเกอร์ชั้นนำอีกมากมายพบกันวันที่ 13-15 พฤศจิกายนนี้ที่พารากอนหอชั้น 5 สยามพารากอนซื้อบัตรได้แล้ววันนี้ที่ซิปอีเวนต์ครับ
This special episode of K&D is the prelude to the Standard Economic Forum 2024, one of the huge events we are all looking forward to at the end of every single year. I'm your host, Weerasha Karakit, and today we have 3 incredible guests with us, joining us for a discussion about something that affects us all, our home of Thailand. We'll be diving into the question of how we can transform Thailand into a global talent destination, a place where talented individuals from around the world not only want to come to work, but also to build a life. Here with us today, first, we have PCK, the CEO of Fastwork, Southeast Asia's largest freelancing platform. Not only is he a certified public accountant, but he's also a prominent content creator here in Thailand. And I love that your social media page and your profile says, before I die, I'll make Thailand a better place. So I think that's super cool. So welcome, PCK. How are you feeling today?
Feeling great. It's the first time I've been interviewed in English for a long time. I usually think in English, so I'm really looking forward to it because I don't have to translate real time. So I'm looking forward to it.
For sure. Looking forward to your answers. And secondly, we have Piatim. He has a rich experience in UK education as a former Eton and Oxford graduate, 2 of the most prestigious institutions in the UK. He also worked internationally with McKinsey and led the edtech startup StartDE. Now he serves as a party list member of Parliament from the People's Party. Khun Parit will also be joining us on stage at the forum in November for a discussion on AI upskill, preparing the workforce for tomorrow. It's great to have you here, Kap Piatim.
Yes, thank you for having me here.
How are you feeling today?
I think similar to Kun CK, it's been a while since I've given an interview in English, so I hope it's not too rusty.
Of course, it'll be fun. And last but not least, Piwin Akharawin. He's a true example of Thailand's top talent. He was once a United Nations Youth Delegate in 2012 and earned his MBA from the University of Newcastle and became a young manager at the age of just 26. Now he's the Asian Pacific Regional Manager at Henkel, a German multinational company based in Singapore and a proud father of 1 son. Welcome, Piwin. How are you feeling?
Very nervous and excited, but very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So on the discussion of making Thailand a top destination for talents, I would like us all to start with a bit of a warm-up activity. So for this first part, I want to talk about Thailand's charm and attractiveness as it currently is. So I want you guys to do a little fun activity with your board and markers. Could you please express how attractive is Thailand for global talents to come work with an emoji? So think of any emoji that you think describes Thailand as a destination for talent, and we're going to talk about your emojis, and then I would like to ask you guys to give it also a rating out of 1 to 10.
Art is not my strong suit.
Okay, Piwin, it seems like you're done already.
Yes.
Would you
So
like to
I show it to the camera?
show it to the camera? Okay, so what emoji is this?
So my emoji is someone who is kind of in the middle of a thought process, like thinking about it. Some parts is good, some parts is maybe requires some thought process. It really depends on who you are as well when
Right.
it comes to this topic.
And in present day, if you had to give Thailand a rating out of 1 to 10 as a destination for top talent, what would you give it?
So I really think that the answer can vary widely depending on who you are, like which company you work for, at what point in your career you are at. So if you're already quite settled in terms of income, you make good money, I think it's a very solid choice. Very nice food, nice people, nice culture. I would give it like an 8 or a 9 even. But if you're someone who is like myself at this point in their career, or especially maybe even earlier, it could be around like 6. Maybe you can argue for a 7.
And PCK, what about your emoji?
Well, I'm happy. I'm
Oh.
happy. I'm biased because I love Thailand.
Okay.
I give it an 8, and Kun Win said a lot of the good reasons. Good weather, it's safe. The most important thing is safe. Right now we're looking places where it's safe, and Thailand's extremely safe.
Right.
You don't have school shooting like the U.S. You don't have crazy wars going on. But there are something that we can improve on, and that's why I give it an 8. There are always room for improvements, and if you're working for a company and you want a very stable life in a way, affordable prices, and close to the beach, you get basically summer all year round. So it's a great destination for expats, and I'm sure a lot of talents, everyone fall in love with Thailand when they arrived, including myself. But there are some things that we can improve on, and to make ourselves more competitive in comparison to other regions of the world. But however, I think even though there are imperfections, I think we all know the imperfections. I really do think that the whole point of if your goal is to be an entrepreneur is to create a business, it's not to be at a place where everyone is at. It's to be at a place where the future relies on. And I think Southeast Asia is an extremely interesting location. Plus the fact that right now it's not really globalization, but it's regionalization, meaning U.S., Russia, China, they're going head to head. So it's no longer like, oh, we're all friends, but it's more of like whose side you're on.
Right.
And when that happens, a lot of the U.S. companies, what you see is that they want to rely less on China. And in ภาษาไทย call it the ส้มหล่น, right? You see that during COVID, where China shut down the manufacturing, the supply chain, it screwed up for a lot of companies.
Right.
So companies in the U.S., they try to outsource it to other regions, India, Vietnam, and hopefully Thailand can be one of them.
Yep. So, Fiat, what emojis did you choose to describe Thailand?
Yeah, I kind of cheated. You actually said an emoji, but I went with this.
Whoa, okay,
So a set of emoji.
basically every feeling.
So the reason I went with a variety of emotions is because I think the experience or the emotion that each foreign person has when they come and work or spend their time in Thailand varies a lot depending on a few factors, right? So firstly, I think if you are here as a tourist, you might on average give a higher score than if you were here as a resident or as someone who were to work here.
Absolutely.
Because as we know, Thailand is an attractive place to come and travel to.
Right. Sure.
But sometimes the quality of life as a resident or as someone who's staying there is less so, right? Secondly, I think the score will also be different depending on whether you're coming to Bangkok or to other parts of Thailand. Because we know that the availability of public services, the level of prosperity, the amount of job opportunities are very much concentrated in Bangkok compared to the other parts of the country. And I think thirdly, even within Bangkok itself, the quality of life that you will have depends a lot on your income. given the high amounts of inequality.
Of course.
So if you're here as a high-income person, you can send your children to good quality international schools. If you're ill, you can go to one of the top-notch private hospitals.
Yes.
If you are traveling around, you can travel in a private car. You're immune to the air pollution that is around. But if you're here as someone who may not be on such high income, the quality of schools may drop a little bit. The queues at hospitals will be longer.
Right.
And when you walk across the street, then if there's air pollution, then you'll be affected by that. So that's why I think the score that each person gives depends a lot on these factors. You're here, like how long you're here for, where you're here, is it in Bangkok or other parts of the country, and the income level that you have.
Right.
So it's hard to pin down one specific number. And I think the range that you see here will be greater compared to other countries.
Absolutely, and that's something we'll touch more on. And so I want to first talk about living and working. I want to ask you first, Piwin, as a person who's working and living in Singapore, Singapore is thought of highly as a place, as a destination where people want to go to work, to live, because the quality of life is good, the society is developed. And how can we make Thailand a better place and a more attractive destination and thought of highly the way that people think about Singapore?
Okay, so it's a very big question, mainly because we're asking for the how, and I think that can be very difficult.
Right.
If I can lay it out like step 1, 2, 3 in order to transform Thailand into Singapore, I should be given an award or some sort, I think. But maybe let's first start by exploring, well then, how is Thailand not Singapore currently, right?
Yep.
And then from there, maybe to dive into my own reasons as well for moving from Thailand to Singapore as part of my career progressions. Maybe through that we can have some reflections on a few key things that Thailand can work on, right? So the number one reason for me is definitely that there are more career opportunities in Singapore, especially if you're looking to get into a global environment, if you're trying to get yourself into a regional or a global role. And one of the simple reasons for that is, there are a lot of big companies, multinational companies who have their regional office set up in Singapore, right? So then by default, those roles will be based out of Singapore. So that's the first reason. The second reason, which CK touched on already, is the language, right? So for the most part, I feel that Singapore is still an English-speaking country.
Right.
So English is one of the primary languages that they use. I can go down the street, talk to street vendors, shop owners, and even though they may be limited to a certain extent depending on who you talk to, but they will definitely be able to understand. And so communication is a non-issue.
Absolutely.
And I really believe that that's quite a significant factor that actually enables Singapore to accommodate for that level of diversity. Because even before the economic boom, it's already home to multiple ethnicities, languages, cultures, beliefs. And so having that is a very good foundation. And so, yeah, a foreigner like myself going there, communication is a non-issue. The third thing is that I really feel that one of the core values in Singapore, although this might not be explicitly stated, but they really value competency. So they are very selective with the foreigners that they allow into the countries.
Right.
So they have different tiers of work visa, and they come with different privileges. Just now, very recently, I think last year, they introduced a new type of work visa called the One Pass, where people who make above 30,000 Singapore dollar per month can apply, and it's valid for 5 years.
Wow.
So something like that, and I feel that type of mentality and expectation is placed on their own citizens as well.
Right.
And I really admire how Singaporeans, they are as much a part of this global talent community as much as the foreign professionals working there. Like I've seen them working in the global setting, I've worked with them, and I perceive that not once do they feel themselves to be like inferior to the foreign professionals there.
Right.
And that is, they really pride themselves on that, and that has allowed that community to be very dynamic, very strong. So that then attracts even more talents coming in. And that has also allowed it to basically home grow their own talents. And if you have that kind of environment, it really makes the people there want to participate in that community. And so they're able to retain the talents as well. And then my final point, and I'm lumping it all together, is that it's basically a very stable and safe environment. So stable as in like security-wise, like I can just walk out of my house past 1 a.m. and still feeling perfectly fine. I'm not concerned to take my young family anywhere in the country. And politically, it's also quite stable, internally and externally. And yeah, that's definitely another huge factor.
And PCK, as someone who has also worked in America, like why do people still think of America as somewhere they want to go to work to as opposed to staying here in Thailand?
Well, the market size is huge, right? If you look into the US, one is that you have the biggest stock market there is.
Right.
If you want to get access to capital, to VC money, to PE money, that's the place. It's the most funded location in the world. And if you make it there, you can make it really, really big. You have the best institution in terms of education. You get and it's a brand too, right?
Right.
If you study in the U.S., you have a U.S. education is a brand, and you can go to any other countries, and you look basically above and beyond compared to other people. And the U.S. plays towards its strength. For example, if you look at the difference between California and Saudi Arabia, you can see very clearly that, both countries, if you look into the way they govern the countries is kind of messy in a way, but it still worked out pretty well because California they basically get a bunch of taxes from Silicon Valley tech companies, and Saudi Arabia gets a bunch of money from the oil drill. So they know how to play towards its strength, and I think that's incredible.
Right.
And U.S. is also a hub for talent. It's a magnet for talent. The best people, the smartest people, the most talented people, they want to be in the U.S.
Right.
Right? If you look at Jensen Huang, he's Taiwanese. He's Taiwanese, but he built NVIDIA for US and now becomes a US weapon. So, I mean, we can go on. And Elon Musk is an immigrant. So you got tons of immigrants, talented immigrants, located to the US and built businesses for the US.
Right.
And that's incredible, right? In Thailand, it's extremely important that we play towards our strength
Right.
and not our weakness. Like, I don't think Thailand, there's no such thing as one size fit all, meaning one method fit all. It's not like, oh, look at Singapore. They did it. Let's do it that way. I think it's different. It depends on the location, right? I think Thailand, we always think our strength is tourism.
Right.
But that hasn't really worked out that well. If you look into, the meat of it is we've been focusing tourism for decades.
Right.
And Bangkok's the number one most visited city. Like, how high do you want to get on the list? Like, we're already number one, and Thailand's still like this, right? How come prosperity never leave Bangkok?
Right.
Because if you promote tourism, does Khon Kaen gets more income? Does Songkhla gets more income? Does Nan gets more income? Does Sukhothai gets more income? No. I mean, basically 5 provinces, like, Chonburi, Chiang Mai, Phuket, Krungthep, like these are basically the region that's getting the most of the money from tourism, right? And if you look at the internal economics, people are sending their kids into Bangkok, and those kids are sending money back to their home. And what actually happens is that's a small economic cycle. Their parents from Khon Kaen are using that money to pay for rent, to pay for loans, and to buy lottery. Most of the lottery revenue comes from outside of Bangkok. And that's not a big economic cycle. Big economic cycle happens when talented individuals, hopefully we can attract and win, go back to Khon Kaen, create businesses there, and basically spend there, rent there, eat there, be a consumer at that particular location. That is what actually creates longevity in terms of prosperity.
Right.
That's extremely, extremely, extremely important. Because Thailand is just Bangkok. If you look at Michelin star restaurant, BTS, MRT, fancy hotels, that's Bangkok only. That's not Thailand.
Right.
You drive 1.5 hours to Lopburi, only 1.5 hours. 100 years how Lopburi is today is still like that. It hasn't changed one bit. And that is kind of a problem. If you want to look at a strength, right? If you go to Saudi Arabia or you go to Middle Eastern countries, it's basically deserts. But how come they were so rich? Because they know that they have oil. Well, we have agriculture. Do you know that 40% of our land are agricultural land? 30% of our workforce is agricultural workforce. But less than 10% of our GDP come from agriculture.
Right.
And that's a big issue. How come we're not used? Every countries have 2 limited resources. One is land, and two is workforce, right? The reason why India is such a powerhouse because they have so many people, more workforce, more hours, more basically they can export labor. Well, we have land masses and quality land masses. U.S. have all the money in the world. They cannot buy sunlight. They have winter. They can only farm once a year. Saudi Arabia have all the money in the world. They cannot buy water. We have both. We have both. But we're not. But agriculture in our country are called peasants.
Yeah.
Are poor people. It's weird. You know who's the number one owner of agricultural land in the U.S. is Bill Gates.
Oh.
Does he sound poor to you? Doesn't.
Not at
Right?
all.
But in Thailand, agriculture is poor. Go to Kaset, Mahalai Kaset. The name is Kaset Sat, right? Ask how many kids actually PhD, actually study Kaset. We're not making this an attractive field at all. We're not utilizing our resources. We try to be like Singapore, but we cannot be Singapore.
Right.
Right? So why not we see that K-pop boom, right?
Yeah.
And we try to create T-pop. Like,
Yeah.
like we try to follow trains, but we're unwilling to create our own train when it's so obvious that agriculture and export is where we're supposed to focus on.
Right.
So that I think that it has been a shame.
Wow, this seems to be like a whole fundamental issue, and it seems like we're not playing to our strengths, basically, right?
Yes.
And neglecting what truly has built our country, which is agriculture, and making it more attractive to workers and to Thai people. So I would like to ask you, Piatim, as someone who is working in politics and someone who is closely involved with the education sector as well, after hearing Piwin and PCK talk about the fundamental problems of Thailand, making Thailand more of an English-speaking country and all of these things that we can work on, like how do you think about Thailand in this current state, and what can we do to make it more attractive?
Yep. So I think when we talk about attracting global talent, I think there are two key questions, right? If I follow Kun Win's comments earlier, the first question is why is this important now more than ever? And then two is how do we attract global talent? On the why, I think right now the mission of attracting global talent for Thailand is becoming increasingly important for two reasons. The first reason is we're actually already an aging society. So in that sense, the proportion of working age people that we have in our country compared to people outside the working age, whether children or elderly people, is decreasing day by day.
Right.
So if we cannot attract a higher number of working age people into our country, that's going to put a strain on our public finances and the quality of welfare and public services. Right? So that sense is a quantity issue. But I think the second reason as well that attracting foreign talent is becoming increasingly important is the skills crisis that we have in our country. If you look at the latest report, I think it was done by the World Bank in conjunction with the, in Thai we call it KSSO, the Education Equality or Education Equity Fund.
Yep.
We noticed that there are certain basic skills that we are currently still facing an issue on. So for example, they highlighted 3 fundamental skills. On one of the 3 is on digital skills, which they mean kind of basic digital skills. So they don't mean coding, they don't mean like advanced software skills. They mean being able to use a phone to search for information online. And right now, 3 in 4 of Thai people in the working age population do not meet the basic requirements of the basic fundamental digital skills. So in that sense, we have a skills crisis in terms of quality as well.
Right.
So in that sense, I think attracting global talent will help us on both issues.
Okay.
On the one hand, we'll increase the number of working age people. On the other hand, we hope that attracting skilled talent into our country will create spillover effect that also help to improve the skills of the Thai workforce. So I think that's kind of the why and why it's so pressing. Right? Now, the difficult question, as Kun Win says, the how. How do we solve this? I took a look at an expat survey report last night, and it's actually very interesting because there are certain areas that we do well on and certain areas that we don't do so well on. And what I noticed is a trend that the areas that we do well on tend to be the areas that are not related to state policy. For example, expats say that we have a lot of good leisure options, we have good food, we have friendly people, for example, not really related to state policy. But the areas that we don't do so well on are directly related to state policy.
Right.
For example, they talk about the environment, which is to do with air pollution, both in Bangkok as well as in other parts of the country. We see that we don't do so well on crime, and as well as, I think a very high proportion of expats mention at least compared to the global average, that they have difficulties, dealing with local authorities.
Right.
So in that sense, we can see this clear trend that what we're doing well on are things that are not really related to policy, but what we're not doing so well on are things that the government can play an active role. So having heard kind of all the comments earlier just now, I jotted down kind of 5 key things that I think the government can do in terms of policy to attract global talent more effectively. And let me just go over the headlines so we can go deep into each one later on.
Absolutely.
The first one is statutory barriers or legal barriers, right? So how do we review our visa arrangements to be able to attract global talent more effectively?
Right.
I think in the past, before this government has come in, we used to kind of have a gap in the middle. So you either have a tourist visa, which is easy to get, but you can only spend a few months here, and you have a very long-term visa, where it's difficult to get, but once you get it, you can stay for a long time.
Right.
There used to be a gap in the middle, which I think is what digital nomads look for, which is somewhere in between.
Right.
Maybe slightly more documentation is required compared to a tourist visa,
Right.
but at least not as much as getting a long-term resident visa.
Yeah.
I know the government has issued a new category here, but I think it still remains to be seen whether it gets the right balance
Right.
in terms of attracting these kind of digital nomads and people who may want to work here for a few years and not long-term residents or not.
Just making it easier for them to actually
Correct.
live
So
here.
state restrictions. The second one is on skills. I'm someone who believes that skills breed skills. So if we want to attract talent here,
Right.
we also want to create an environment where that person feels that he or she can also develop his or her own skills as well. The basic requirement is probably English, because at least that enables them to work together more effectively.
Right.
And we know that our English proficiency ranking, I think, is the lowest amongst the 8 ASEAN countries that are measured by the English Proficiency Index. So how do we improve the English skills of our own domestic workforce in order to also attract global talent, as well as how do we ensure that we upskill our workforce to ensure that there is an exchange of skills between local and global talent. So that's the second one. The third one is on services, and Kun CK mentioned, right, that if you travel outside Bangkok, the availability of public service is much more restricted.
Right.
I think I still find it amazing that even in our bigger cities, or one of the big tourist destinations in Thailand like Chiang Mai and Phuket, public transportation is still an issue.
Right.
Even in these kind
Absolutely.
of big tourist destinations. So in that sense, I think we really have the need to improve our public services, because that will play an important role in improving the quality of life of people who live here.
And
So
do you think that's something that the state can work with?
of course, that's definitely the state's responsibility, and my party's policy is to decentralize the power to provide public services, especially public transport, to local governments more.
Right.
Right now, local governments, even if they want to, start developing public transportation in their area, is still restricted by certain regulations that mean that they need to ask for permission from the central authority. So that creates a bit of a bottleneck in terms of driving public transportation. So that's the third one. The fourth one is on safety. So I think here I already talked about environmental safety,
Right.
which I think the clearest example is probably Chiang Mai. Chiang Mai, on surface is a very attractive place to come and stay and work, right?
Yeah.
But we now know that for certain months during the year, Chiang Mai becomes one of the most dangerous cities in the world in terms of
Right.
air pollution. So if we don't fix that, then it's going to be very difficult to attract global talent. Right? But the other part of safety, I think, is to do with the issue of corruption in Thailand, because the level of crime that can still persist in Thailand, correlates directly with the amount of corruption. If we do not solve the issue of briberies and corruption within the police, then the crime will continue,
Right.
and then that will mean our cities are much less safe for both local residents and global talent. And then the final and fifth one, and I like Kun Vin's point, is social integration, because I think what global talent would like to experience is a country or a society where we are tolerant of foreigners, right? How do we make sure that there is an acceptance of diversity of cultures, diversity of views?
How do you think we are with that right now?
If you look at the Expat Insider survey, that is actually an area that we're not doing so well on, according to the reflections from expats. So I think, there are mixed reports, right? On the one hand, we get reports that Thai people are friendly, we do well on that. But when we specifically ask about tolerance with foreigners, we don't do so well on that metric.
Right.
So I think in that sense, it's in a way it's a government's responsibility to try and embed norms and create a culture where we are accepting of different viewpoints and different cultures, and then that will make it a much more conducive environment for global talent to come in. So actually 5S, right? Statutory barriers, skills, services, safety, and social integration.
Wow, you're talented at this. That's amazing. ประเทศไทยมีเสน่ห์น่าดึงดูดแค่ไหนในสายตาชาวโลกพบกับ K&D Roundtable ล้อมวงคุยภาษาอังกฤษกับแขกรับเชิญพิเศษ 3 ท่าน How can we transform Thailand into a global talent destination? A place where talents around the world not only want to come to work but also build a life. อนาคตการเรียนภาษาอังกฤษยังจำเป็นอยู่ไหมถอดบทเรียนการศึกษาอังกฤษและสิงคโปร์โละวัฒนธรรมเก่าพัฒนา talent ไทยให้ไป global ปรับทัศนคติประเทศไทยดึงดูดและสร้างคนเก่งอย่างไรให้ได้แบบอเมริกา AI กับทักษะดิจิทัลประเทศไทยพบกับภริษ วชรศิลป์ a young talented Thai politician with rich international working experience CK Jung, the CEO of Fast Work, Southeast Asia's largest freelancing platform who swears to make Thailand a better place. Akrawin Sangkhanan, the regional manager of Henkel, a German multinational company who's been living, working, and building a family in Singapore for years. And I'm going to be your host, Weerasha Karakit. This special episode of K&D is the prelude to the Standard Economic Forum 2024, Brave New World เศรษฐกิจไทยไล่กวดโลกใหม่ติดตามคลิปเสวนาภาษาอังกฤษของประเด็นสำคัญทั้ง 5 เรื่องได้ที่ช่อง K&D Studio วันที่ 22 ตุลาคมเป็นต้นไปนะครับ I'll talk to y'all later